My son and his wife locked us in the basement. Their voices echoed down the stairs. This is ours now. Sitting in the damp dark, I felt Cornelius lean close and whisper, "Stay quiet. They don't know what's behind that wall." When their footsteps finally faded, he pried loose a single brick, revealing a secret he'd guarded for 39 years. Hello, dear listeners. Thank you for joining me today. Before we begin, I'd love for you to subscribe and tell me which state or country you're listening from. It warms me to know how far our stories travel. Now, settle in. This house breathes. I know its rhythm as well as my own. For 40 years I've lived inside its heartbeat, the warm inhale of Georgia sunlight through pecan trees, the cool exhale as the old beams groan at night. My father-in-law built it not as a house but a legacy, a place meant to hold laughter and lineage. This morning I made chicken dumpling soup, the way my grandmother taught me. Cornelius barely eats these days, but the scent still reaches him through the fog. As I diced carrots into tiny amber cubes, I remembered showing our son, Trevant, how to do the same, his small fingers gripping a toy-safe knife. "Mama, I'm a chef," he'd shout. His laughter is still trapped somewhere in the grain of that kitchen table. Then came her voice. "Another bland bowl of that, Miss Idella?" Kessia, my daughter-in-law, standing in the doorway in her ivory silk robe. She never calls me Mom. Only Miss Idella, polite as ice. "It's for Trevant," I told her softly. "He needs real nutrition," she snapped. "Not that." They moved in 3 years ago, after Cornelius's first stroke. It felt right at first. Family should stay together when times are hard. I gave them the entire second floor. Cornelius and I shifted downstairs to his old study so he wouldn't climb stairs. Slowly, their presence began to replace ours. Their furniture, their perfumes, hers too sweet, his too sour, pressing out the scent of our life. Last week she moved my father-in-law's old armchair. The one with worn leather cracked like an old friend's smile. She shoved it into a dark corner and replaced it with something metallic and soulless. "It doesn't match the new aesthetic," she said. I said nothing. That night, when they slept, I touched the old leather and remembered Trevant napping in his grandfather's arms, remembered sitting there pregnant, reading archive histories, dreaming of returning to my work one day. But life kept moving, and my dreams gathered dust like forgotten attic books. Now Cornelius lies in his study, staring at the ceiling. His body is fading, but every so often his mind flickers bright, like a coal refusing to die. And behind that loose brick is the reason they should never have locked us down here. I walked to him, sat down, and held his hand, skin thin and dry like old parchment. "How are you, love?" I whispered. He turned slowly, eyes finally finding mine. "They're so loud," he breathed. "Yes," I said softly. "They always are. Their voices, their arguments about money, their laughter, none of it belonged to the quiet, steady life we once had." Trevant came down for lunch. No greeting. He dropped into a chair, eyes glued to his phone. I set a bowl of soup in front of him. He pushed it away. "Mom, we need to talk. Seriously." And like a shadow summoned by trouble, Kessia appeared beside him, arms crossed, eyes sharp and predatory. I'd learned that look. It meant they'd been plotting. "With the inheritance and all the paperwork," Trevant began, still scrolling. "And Dad being like this, to avoid problems, you should sign the house over to me. As a gift. Just a formality." A coldness hit my chest, not from the request, but from how casually he said it, as if asking me to pass the salt. "No," I said. My voice didn't shake. "This house belongs to your father and me. As long as we're alive, nothing changes. So you don't want to make things easier?" Kessia leaned forward. "You want your only son dealing with courthouse chaos later?" "When you know, I know exactly what I'm doing," I cut in. "And that is why the answer is no." Finally, Trevant lifted his eyes. There was no love there, only irritation, cold and sharp. As if I weren't his mother but an obstacle in his way. "I don't get the problem," he snapped. "We live here. We take care of Dad. You live in my house," I said quietly. I fix him. I take care of Dad. Then Cornelius appeared in the doorway, breathing hard, but eyes blazing with a clarity I hadn't seen in months. He looked not at me, but at our son. You, he said, voice shaking but sharp. You are a disgrace to our name. The word hit Trevant like a whip. His face twisted, not just in anger, but in wounded pride. His precious Dubois name, his entire identity, struck at its core. What? He roared, leaping to his feet so fast the chair crashed behind him. A disgrace? I'm the one keeping this name alive. This house should be mine, it always should have been mine. He moved toward his father. I rushed between them. Trevant, stop. No. I'm done. His eyes were wild. This is ours now. His hands clamped onto my shoulders, firm, authoritative, and pushed me aside. Then he grabbed his father under the arms. Cornelius was so weak he folded like a rag doll. Trevant dragged us down the hallway toward the heavy oak door to the basement. What are you doing? I screamed, fighting back. You'll have time to think about your behavior, he growled. He shoved us through the doorway. The smell of cold, wet earth washed over us. We stumbled onto the top step, Cornelius nearly collapsing from my arms. The door slammed. A heavy bolt clicked into place. We were swallowed by darkness. Only my ragged breathing and Cornelius's thin, wheezing exhales filled the air. I sank onto the cold stone step, cradling him. No tears came. Inside, everything had frozen over. Years of service, years of love, my entire life given to that boy, this house, this family, and it all ended here, in this damp, forgotten cellar. I broke silently, piece by piece. Then, in the crushing stillness, I felt Cornelius lean close. His whisper was barely breath. Be quiet, they don't know what's behind that wall. I froze. Listening. Above us, Trevant's heavy footsteps pounded across the floorboards, followed by Kessia's lighter, clipped steps. The front door slammed so hard the echo rattled the pipes. Silence. Then an engine starting. Accelerating. Fading into the distance. And we were alone, with the secret my husband had kept hidden for 39 years. They were gone. And we were left alone, in the cold, breathless silence of our own home, locked inside its stone belly. Help me, Cornelius rasped. His voice was weak, but there was a steel in it I hadn't heard in years. I lifted him. His body trembled, frail, cold, unsteady. Together, step by uneven step, we descended the chipped stairs to the dirt floor below. The air smelled of spoiled vegetables once stored here, of damp clay, of things forgotten. A single thread of light slipped under the door above us. In that dim glow, I could barely make out the outlines of old shelves drowning in cobwebs, jars long emptied, the ghosts of what once filled this room. But Cornelius didn't lead me to the shelves. He led me to the far wall, the bones of the house. He leaned against the rough, wet stones, breath-shuddering. Here, he whispered. My father showed me when I was 18. Said it was only for the worst moment. He swallowed. I never thought it would come. His hand searched blindly along the wall. Then he stopped. Here. Press. I had no strength left, but I pressed anyway. One stone, indistinguishable from the rest, shifted inward with a soft click. A black square opened behind it. I reached in. My fingers brushed cold metal. A small tin box, like the tobacco tins from my childhood. I pulled it out. It was shockingly light, as if empty. We returned to the steps and sat. Cornelius fumbled with the latch. His hands shook so badly it felt like minutes before the soft click finally came. Inside, not gold, not photos, not heirlooms. Just several yellowed papers, folded tight. He lifted the top document. Even in this thin light, I saw the faded purple seal, the kind that only appears on official state records. A birth certificate. Read it, he said. The paper felt brittle enough to crumble in my hands. The name at the top meant nothing to me. Cassius Thorne. Born in the Mississippi State Penitentiary Hospital, a place whispered about only in horror stories. Mother, blank. Father, Orion Thorne. I don't understand, I whispered. Cornelius met my eyes. That was me, he said quietly. That's my real name. Something cracked inside me. I had lived 40 years with Cornelius Dubois, the noble son of Dr. Dubois, the proud heir of a famed family. And now a thin sheet of paper told me the man I had married, slept beside, raised a child with, was a stranger masked in another man's name. He handed me the next document. An adoption decree. Cassius Thorne adopted by Langston James Dubois. Name changed to Cornelius Dubois. All traces sealed by state order. The final item wasn't official at all. A letter. In Langston Dubois's bold, confident handwriting. Cornelius passed it to me. Son, it began. If you are reading this, the dark time has come and I am likely gone. I never told you the whole truth. I feared it would break your life. Your father, Orion Thorne, was brilliant, honest, courageous. But in our country, honesty and courage can become crimes. He was framed, declared a threat to national security, a traitor. He died in prison. He was my friend. My colleague. I swore I would not let his son be lost. I took you in. I gave you my name, my family, my shelter, to protect you. To erase the trail of a traitor's child. Live with dignity, Cornelius. Bear the Dubois name with honor, but never forget the blood in your veins, the blood of a brave man. When I folded the letter, something cold from the basement spread inside me, ice blooming through bone. All these years, Cornelius had lived terrified of a past he never chose. He had clung to a name that wasn't his. And Trevant, our son, had built his entire identity on that name. His pride. His entitlement. His cruelty. All of it balanced on a lie. Every humiliation I had swallowed, every cruel word, every moment of disrespect, all of it collapsed into a single point inside my chest. But it didn't explode into tears or rage. It crystallized. Clear. Cold. Unbreakable. I am an archivist. I work with forgotten truths, facts people bury, rewrite, or hope will never be found. I understand the weight of a yellow document, the power inside a faded signature. And what I held in my hands now wasn't just a family secret. It was a weapon. It was a weapon. Power, absolute, undeniable. We sat in the dark for 2, maybe 3 hours. Time slipped out of shape. Cornelius dozed off against my shoulder, drained by fear and exhaustion. I stayed perfectly still, staring into the void as my mind, quiet for the first time in years, clicked back into place, smooth and precise, like a well-oiled machine. A plan assembled itself, cold and logical. Finally, footsteps above us. The bolt scraped back with a sharp metallic hiss. The door flew open, light crashing into my eyes. Trevant stood in the doorway, the arrogant smirk plastered across his face. Well? Thought it through, he asked, mock heroic. Father, are you uncomfortable? Should I call a nurse? He was savoring the performance. This was his stage. Yes, I said, rising slowly. Even I was startled by how calm my voice sounded. He needs care. Give me your phone. I'll make the call. He hesitated, thrown off by my obedience, then handed me his phone with a triumphant curl of his lip. One call. For a nurse. No funny business. The phone was warm against my cold fingers. I didn't need to scroll through contacts. I knew the number by heart. Years ago, I had read a feature in Essence about a fearless attorney who specialized in high-conflict family cases and inheritance wars. Veda Sterling. A razor-sharp woman. I remembered her name just in case. Turns out, this was the case. I dialed. A clear female voice answered. Veda Sterling speaking. Hello, Ms. Sterling, I said steadily. My name is Idella Dubois. I need your help. I arranged the meeting, then handed the phone back. He checked the call log, an unknown number. He assumed it was a care agency. Satisfaction flooded his face. He thought he'd won. Poor old mother, finally broken. Good girl, he muttered. Smart decision. Come on, Kessia, help me get Dad upstairs. They lifted Cornelius with exaggerated gentleness, a whole theatrical show of heroic caretakers. They tucked him in, straightened blankets, brought water. A performance for an audience of one, me. I watched silently. They mistook silence for surrender. Their first and greatest mistake. In the days that followed, a strange, artificial quiet settled over the house. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, cooking broth, cleaning, washing. They stopped noticing me altogether. To them, I was furniture now. Convenient. Invisible. And invisibility gave me what I'd never had before, access. To their words. To their schemes. One morning at breakfast, while I placed biscuits on the table, Kessia flipped through a glossy magazine and said, "Baby, I've been thinking. That wall between the living room and your father's office, it's not load-bearing. If we tear it down, we could have a huge open space. A studio. Maybe put a white marble bar right here." I froze. The wall she wanted to destroy. Cornelius leaned against it when he wrote his last medical journals. He taught little Trevant his first letters there. And if you looked closely, you could still see the faint pencil mark of our son's height at age 5. She talked about it like it was nothing, just an obstacle in the way of her bar. Brilliant idea, Trevant murmured, not even looking up from his coffee. The study will be empty soon anyway. And the library? Well, the books can be scrapped or recycled. No one reads that stuff anymore. Recycled. The books my husband collected his entire life, rare volumes of Black history, leather-bound editions embossed in gold, first prints signed by the great minds of the Harlem Renaissance. Recycled. I set the plate of biscuits on the table. My movements were fluid, steady. Not a single muscle in my face twitched. But inside me, something cracked, clean, irreversible. The final illusion a mother carries, the fantasy that somewhere, deep inside her grown son, the child who once listened in awe to his grandfather's voice still existed. They saw my calm and mistook it for apathy, for the numb detachment of age. They had no idea, this was the calm of a surgeon studying the anatomy of a diseased organ before making the first incision. Every word they spoke, every gesture, they were symptoms. Their disease had a name, greed, threaded with vanity. The final death of my illusions came on Tuesday evening. They approached me as I sat by Cornelius's bed, reading old poems aloud. They entered with the solemn faces of people visiting the terminally ill. "Mom," Trevant began, his voice dripping with counterfeit sympathy. "Kessia and we've talked. We know how hard this has been for you. The house. Dad. Everything. You've sacrificed your whole life for us. You deserve rest." Kessia immediately stepped in, placing her manicured hand on my shoulder. Light touch. Skin cold. "We found a wonderful place for you, Ms. Idella," she said sweetly. "Not a nursing home, no, no. A luxury senior community. Just outside Atlanta. Pine trees. A lake. For meals a day. 24/7 medical care. You'd have a cozy room of your own. You could read, walk, meet people your age. We'd visit every weekend." They looked at me, expecting gratitude. They truly believed they were helping me. Offering me, a woman who built this home with her hands and her heart, a cozy room in exchange for my past, my life, everything sacred to me. They wanted to uproot me like a weed and replant me in a government-approved pot to quietly wither away, freeing them to build their future atop my bones. I lifted my eyes to them. I looked at Trevant, his face so much like his father's and yet utterly foreign. I searched him for something, a shadow of doubt. A flicker of shame. Nothing. Only confidence in his righteousness. And a faint irritation at having to deal with emotion. In that moment, the last drop of maternal love in me died. It did not burst in anger. It did not dissolve in tears. It simply ceased. Like a spring breaking inside an old clock, the pendulum that swung for 40 years finally falling still. I looked at this man and saw not my son, but a stranger, calculating, cold, and the realization brought no pain. Only a chilling clarity. I owed him nothing. Not love. Not forgiveness. Not pity. That is a very generous offer, I said quietly. My voice sounded hollow, but steady. I need to think. Of course. Take your time, Trevant beamed, thrilled the scene had passed without tears or accusation. We only want what's best for you. They left, trailing expensive perfume and the absolute certainty of victory. I sat there, listening only to the slow breathing of the sleeping Cornelius. My eyes drifted to the photos on the dresser, our wedding. Little Trevant on the beach at Tybee Island. A life built on love, sacrifice, and now revealed to be balanced on a foundation of lies. But even those lies were nobler than the ugly truth my son and his wife exposed tonight. I felt no longer like a victim. Resentment evaporated, leaving behind a hollow space and a sharp, cold resolve. They had severed the last ties themselves. They had freed me from the chains of motherhood. And worst of all for them, they had underestimated me. They did not know that quiet archives hold documents capable of rewriting destinies, and that a quiet woman who has spent her life in those archives knows exactly how to use them. Tomorrow, I meet Veda Sterling. And I will not go there seeking help. I will go there with a battle plan. The next morning, I told Trevant I needed to go into town, to the pharmacy to pick up a rare medication the local shop didn't carry. He handed me taxi money with the pomp of a man bestowing charity. Kessia helped me into my coat, smoothing the collar the way one does with a child. Don't be long, Ms. Idella. Lunch needs to be ready. I nodded and walked out, feeling their condescending eyes following me. They thought they were watching an obedient old woman run errands. They didn't know I was marching toward war. Underscore 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 Veda Sterling's office sat in a modern building in downtown Savannah, high ceilings, quiet hallways, glass that reflected nothing but clarity. She turned out to be a woman in her early 40s with sharp, cutting eyes and absolutely no fluff. She didn't gasp. She didn't pity. She listened. I spoke evenly, without emotion, the insults, the demands, the gifts, the basement door locking behind me. When I finished, she was silent for a moment, studying me. Do you have any documents proving ownership of your home? She finally asked. Her voice was calm, but steel lived underneath. I have something more important. I reached into my bag, pulled out the tin box, and placed everything inside it on her polished desk. The birth certificate for Cassius Thorne, the adoption papers, the letter from my father-in-law. Veda slid on her glasses and began reading. Slowly. Carefully. As if absorbing each word like it was volatile. I watched her expression change, professional interest shifting into surprise, then into the tight, focused concentration of a strategist realizing she's been dealt a winning card. She looked up at me, excitement flickering in her eyes. Mrs. Dubois, this changes everything. Absolutely everything. The name Dubois, she explained, wasn't just a surname, it was capital. My son had built his career, his relationships, his entire social standing on that name. If it turned out he had no blood claim to it, I understand, I interrupted. I want my house. And my peace. You'll get far more than that, she said. And the notes in her voice made something inside me hum. You'll get justice. But I need time. There are details I must verify. The name. Orion Thorne. It rings a bell. Let me work. underscore 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 underscore. I returned home without the documents and slipped quietly back into my gray routine. Seeing that I no longer mentioned the senior facility, Trevant and Kessia assumed I had surrendered to fate. They behaved like full-fledged landlords. Kessia ordered furniture catalogs. In the evenings they sat in the living room debating which shade of gray would best complement the walls of their future studio. I drifted past silently, but every word they spoke lodged itself inside me, another stone in the foundation of my resolve. Underscore 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 underscore. A week passed. A slow, tense, suffocating week. Then the old landline rang, the one Trevant thought nobody used. They were out of the house. Mrs. Dubois, can you talk? Veda's voice was tight, vibrating with restrained excitement. Yes. I'm alone. I have news, she said. And it's extraordinary. I accessed archival materials, unofficial ones. I had to use some of my father's old connections. He was a historian. What I found explains why Langston Dubois was terrified of his adopted son's past. She paused, and I heard her inhale sharply. Orion Thorne wasn't merely a dissident. That word is far too small. He was one of the leading theoretical physicists of his time, a genius positioned to change the world. In the late 1960s, he was part of a project of national significance. But he held firm beliefs. He refused to contribute to research he believed could lead to catastrophe. They first tried to persuade him. Then force him. Another breath. He wouldn't bend. So they broke him. They fabricated charges. He wasn't just accused of dissent, he was accused of treason. Of leaking classified data to foreign intelligence. I listened, and the cold that had settled in me since the basement hardened into ice. There was a closed trial, Veda went on. His name was erased from journals, university records, government files. As if he never existed. But in certain circles, he's still remembered. Not as a scientist. As a stain. A brand. A warning. My breath vanished. I dropped into a chair. Do you understand what this means, Mrs. Dubois? Her voice lowered, steady as steel. Your son, Trevant, his entire business lives off reputation and lineage. He flaunts the Dubois name. His partners care about purity, legacy, clean bloodlines. They think they're dealing with the grandson of a celebrated academic. Imagine what happens when they learn he's actually the grandson of Orion Thorne, a man synonymous with treason. There it was. Not a weapon. A bomb. A bomb powerful enough to reclaim my home and obliterate the empire my son built on pride and borrowed glory. This won't just strip his inheritance, Veda said softly. It will destroy him. Socially. Professionally. Financially. He'll become an outcast. For him and his wife, it's worse than death. I hung up. The kitchen was quiet, sun pouring through the window. A geranium bloomed on the sill. Everything looked the same, but nothing was. The stakes had soared beyond rooftops. This was no longer about an old house or a humiliated mother. This was the total annihilation of my son's life. And I felt no horror, no pity, none of the maternal instinct that should have screamed in me. No. Only a cold, exquisite satisfaction. Justice, measured and precise. You wanted my house. You wanted to lock me away. You wanted to erase me like a footnote in someone else's story. Fine. Let's see how your life looks when it's the one wiped clean, When everything you built on arrogance and lies collapses into dust at the whisper of truth. I rose and went to the window. My garden, the pecan tree where little Trevant once played, the last piece of the boy I had loved more than life. I whispered a goodbye, not to the man upstairs now, but to the child he used to be. A farewell without mercy, because I knew I would pull the trigger without hesitation. A car engine approached. They were home. My heart didn't skip. It beat steady, cold, counting down. I walked into the hall to meet them, not as their servant, but as the owner of this house. For the first time in months, my shoulders lifted. They burst in laughing, arms full of bags from expensive stores. Kessia waving a roll of wallpaper. "Idella, you're here," she said, not even looking at me. "Trevant, look. This pearl shade will be perfect in the foyer." Too wrapped in their own fantasies to notice I'd changed. Too busy decorating the future they planned inside my walls. 2 days later, on a Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. Trevant answered it, irritated, muttering about unannounced visitors. The end had arrived. I waited in the living room. I already knew who it was. Veda Sterling stood in the doorway, dark suit, sharp lines, a thin leather case in her hand. Behind her, a man in a formal uniform, a courier for a law firm. "Dubois Trevant Cornelius?" Veda asked, flat and businesslike. "Yes." "And you are?" Trevant's gaze swept over her, sizing her up. "My name is Veda Sterling. I represent the legal interests of the owner of this home, Idella Dubois. This is for you." She handed him a thick envelope. Confused, Trevant took it, glancing at me, then at her. Panic flickered across his face. "Owner? What owner?" "This is my family's house. I suggest you familiarize yourself with the documents," Veda replied coolly. Kessia drifted in, drawn by the voices. Seeing a stranger, she frowned. Annoyed, Trevant tore the envelope open. He read. His face drained. Confusion, anger, and then, suddenly, explosive laughter. "Eviction," he shouted. "Mother, is this your joke? You hired an actress to scare us? This is insane." Kessia snatched the papers from him, scanned them, then smirked. "Idella, we thought you were harmless, but you decided to play games. Cute. But we really don't have time." She turned to Veda. "Ma'am, I'm afraid my mother-in-law misled you. She's elderly." A little confused. Here, with triumphant flair, she strode to the file cabinet and pulled out a folder. "These are the real documents. The gift deed. The house belongs to my husband, Trevant Dubois." She thrust the papers toward Veda. Veda accepted them without glancing my way. She lifted the pages to the light, examining them with calm precision. "Interesting," she murmured. Then she returned the papers to Kessia. Especially the signature, very fresh, and the notary seal. "I know this notary. Mr. Henderson. A shame he died 2 years ago." Silence slammed into the room. The laugh froze on Trevant's lips. Kessia's face went paper white. What are you talking about?" she stuttered. "I'm talking about the fact that this document is a crude forgery." Veda's voice remained steady, merciless. "Forensics will confirm it in a day. And then we won't be discussing eviction. We'll be discussing felony fraud and grand larceny. That carries prison time." Trevant lurched forward, face burning. "Who do you think you are, threatening us in our own home?" "I'm an attorney. And I'm not threatening you. I'm outlining consequences." She continued, calm as steel. "This house belongs to my client. That is affirmed by the original will of your late father, Langston Dubois. It states clearly that his only heir, to all his property, is his daughter-in-law, Idella Dubois, in gratitude for her care for the family. Your father, Cornelius, knew this. He never contested it." She let the word father linger for half a breath, the first precise incision. Trevant and Kessia exchanged a look. And for the first time, I saw fear, real, animal fear, in their eyes. No arrogance. No scorn. Just the raw terror of creatures cornered. We'll fight it. Travant shouted. We'll prove she's incompetent, that you manipulated her. I'm the only Dubois, the direct heir. I have rights to this house. Veda nodded slowly, as if she had been waiting for that exact line. Then she stepped forward. Her voice dropped, low and almost conspiratorial, yet somehow even more chilling. You can certainly go to court, file lawsuits, contest the will. But remember this, Mr. Dubois. If you challenge Langston Dubois's final wishes, you'll first have to prove in court that you legally have that right, that you, as you claim, are the direct heir. She paused, letting the words settle like a weight in the air. That will require a full and public investigation into the Dubois lineage. All necessary genealogical tests and archival excavations to verify, let's say, the purity of your family bloodline. Silence swallowed the room. My heart pounded so loud I thought they could hear it. She didn't mention the name Thorne. She didn't mention Trezen. She just dropped the phrase full and public genealogical investigation, a silent bomb detonating between us. Kessia staggered, gripping the back of a chair, her face twisting in shock and confusion. But Travant understood perfectly. Not the details, not the full truth, but he heard the threat aimed right at his world, at the very foundation of his identity. His skin turned pale. His lips took on a bluish tint. They looked at me, the quiet silver-haired woman who had stood silently by the fireplace all this time. And in their eyes, finally, I saw it, not just fear, but recognition. Recognition that the old woman they erased, locked in the basement, ready to be shipped off to a home, held the strings to their fate. And I was ready to cut them. Veda gave me a final nod, then turned and walked out, the courier following close behind. The door clicked softly, a gunshot echoing in the heavy silence. The three of us were left, me, my son, and his wife. The air thickened, heavy and hard to breathe. Travant was the first to recover. Shock gave way to rage, his dark, bestial, wiping out everything in its path. What is this? He yelled, turning to me. His face twisted, unrecognizable. Malicious. What have you done? You're destroying your own family. You conspired with that shark to throw us out? He lunged at me. For a moment, I saw the madness in his eyes, the same madness from that day he shoved us into the basement. But I felt no fear. I stood firm and met his gaze. You don't understand what you're involved in. Kessia cut in, voice sharp as a hiss. Genealogy? What genealogy? What does she mean? Are you hiding something? Some shameful secret? They screamed, accused, threatened. They said they'd send me to an asylum, prove I was insane, that I'd disgrace the Dubois name. They hurled their words like stones, trying to break my silence, force me to fear, to retreat. But their stones bounced off my calm confidence like peas off a stone wall. I stayed silent and watched. Let their rage burn itself out into ashes. When their threats dwindled, their breaths came heavy and ragged, exhausted by their own fury, the tactic shifted. They realized I couldn't be shaken by shouting or force. So they struck other chords, strings they thought still resonated in my soul. Kessia was first to sit down, burying her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, a performance I recognized, but a clever one. Mother, oh mother, she wept. How can this be? We are family. We love you. We want what's best. We think of your future, your peace. Yes, maybe we were wrong. We had heated up, but was it worth destroying everything over this? Travant stepped forward and crouched before me. He reached to grab my elbow, but I pulled back slightly, and his hand fell away. He looked up at me, and the anger had vanished from his eyes. Instead, a faint sorrow and the wounded pride of a son filled them. Mother, he said softly, almost innocent, remember everything that's happened. Remember how you raised me. You gave me everything. You sacrificed your career, your dreams, for me, to become who I am. He spoke of my sacrifices, the ones he never appreciated, always took for granted. Now he pulled them out like a dusty old flag hiding something beneath. "You're my mother," his voice trembled, almost sincere this time. "My only bloodline, my legacy. Everything I do it for our family's future, for our name, to make the Dubois name echo louder. That's your honor, too. Your father's honor. Your grandfather's honor." I looked at him. For the first time in a long while, something stirred inside me besides anger and cold resolve. Regret. Deep, piercing, unbearable regret, not for my son, but for the man sitting at my feet. A man whose life turned out to be a house built from cards on the shaky sands of another family's name. He clung desperately to this name, this legend, because he had nothing else. Without the Dubois name, he was no one. He waited for a response. Tears, reproach, maybe even forgiveness. But my heart stayed silent. That day, it had turned to stone in the basement. I exhaled slowly. When I spoke, my voice cut through the silence, calm and resolute enough to shake them both. "The house is the smallest part of this, Trevant." He stared at me, confused. "You've lived your whole life," I continued, locking eyes with him, never blinking, claiming a legacy that was never truly yours. "The respect you demand, the name you built your life and business on, the pride you carry, none of it is real. It's all a ghost." I said nothing more. I didn't explain. I didn't name Thorn. I didn't tell the story of his real grandfather. I let the words hang between us, a ghost. I saw his mind working, frantic to piece it together. I saw fear grow in his eyes, the shape of something unknown, monstrous. "What?" he whispered. "What are you saying? What legacy? What name?" "I am Dubois," he said. "My father is Cornelius Dubois. My grandfather is Langston Dubois." "Your grandfather, Langston Dubois, was a great man," I said quietly, with dignity. "He named your father to save both him and you. You've turned that name into a commodity, a shield for your vanity, and you've dishonored it." His father was right. I left him to discover the rest. I knew my son's imagination well. I knew his greatest fear, becoming worthless, becoming a fraud. Now, I saw those fears reflected in his eyes, fueled by my silence. He could imagine anything, illegitimacy, hidden shame in the bloodline, any blot that might stain the brilliant Dubois legacy. Any of those thoughts was torture. I had fed him this poison to chew on, a slow toxin that would eat away at him from within. Fear of the unknown was my strongest ally. Kessia glanced at me, then at her husband, utterly confused. She only saw her strong, confident Trevant crushed on the floor by a few of my words. I stood up, exhausted yet strangely relieved. "You have 3 days to move your things out," I said, heading toward my room. "I advise you not to waste that time arguing." I closed the door behind me, hearing nothing from them afterward. I approached the bed where Cornelius slept and sat beside him, taking his hand in mine. It was warm. I looked at his peaceful face and thought about the lifelong burden he carried, the terrible price our son paid because that burden was never lifted in time. 3 days passed in thick, tense silence. They didn't move out. I caught them whispering for hours, locking themselves in the bedroom. Their phones kept ringing non-stop. I knew they wouldn't give up. They were preparing their final, reckless move, and I was ready. On the evening of the 3rd day, Trevant entered my room. He wore an expensive suit, his face pale but determined. A fierce, almost manic confidence shone through. "Tomorrow at 11 a.m., at Unquack, our townhouse," he said sharply. "The family council will be there, Uncle Peter, Aunt Vera, my main business partners. You and your lawyer better be there too. Let's see who wins." He turned and left without waiting for a reply. It was their challenge, their last gambit. They were moving the battlefield onto their territory, surrounding their allies and crushing me under public opinion. They planned a public trial where I would be accused, fiercely, of insanity. An angry old woman manipulated by a predatory lawyer. They wanted me declared incompetent, so they could control both me and the house. A clever move. But once again, they underestimated me. The next day, at 11 a.m. sharp at Unquack, Veda Sterling and I entered the living room of their city apartment. A vast, impersonal space, furnished with expensive but cold furniture. And packed with people. Our relatives, whom I hadn't seen in years, Peter, Cornelius's cousin, a city official, his wife Vera wearing pearls. Strangers with sharp business faces, the partners Trevant valued so much. Trevant and Kessia stood at the center, masters of the scene. Kessia poured water into glasses, playing the charming hostess. Trevant radiated a solid confidence meant to inspire trust. As we entered, all conversations stopped. All eyes turned to me. I felt their curiosity, judgment, pity. To them, I was the star of a messy family drama. Veda and I sat on prepared chairs, slightly off to one side. I remained silent. My heart beat steadily. I felt no fear, only a strange sense of being home. In my briefcase, before placing the old documents on the table to restore the truth, Trevant began to speak. His voice was full of pain and nobility. He spoke of how much he loved and respected his mother, how hard it was to see her condition. He hinted at her dark reasoning, her fragile sensitivity to old age, how easy it was to manipulate the elderly. He never once named Veda. He spoke only of this woman, an unscrupulous lawyer who had sneaked into a sick woman's trust for profit. He told how he and Kessia had cared for the parents, ensuring a peaceful old age in the best facility. His speech was well crafted. Every word landed perfectly. He painted himself as the loving, suffering son and me as the obsessed, cruel mother. He spoke for a long time. Family members nodded sympathetically. Partners watched with understanding. I saw the balance tipping in his favor. He was almost winning. When he finished, a heavy silence filled the room. Trevant looked at me with barely hidden triumph. "That's basically it," he said, spreading his arms. "We only want to protect Mother, from herself and outside influences. This is about guardianship. Otherwise, she'll do something foolish, like take away the roof over her own and her father's head." Then Veda stood up. She didn't argue or defend herself. Calmly, she walked to the table in the center of the room. Everything Mr. Dubois said was very moving. She began evenly, "But now let's move from emotion to fact. Facts are stubborn things." She took a forged certificate from her briefcase and placed it on the table. "This document," she said, "is what Mr. Dubois and his wife presented as the basis for their claim to the house." She paused at a document stating that Mrs. Dubois had lost the house. Then, she placed another paper beside it, a handwriting analysis report confirming the signature was forged. And a certificate from the notary archive stating that the notary who supposedly certified this paper had died 2 years before it was signed. A murmur ran through the room. Uncle Peter frowned, removed his glasses. Trevant's business partners exchanged glances. The image of the beloved son began to crack. "This is insinuation," Trevant shouted, though his voice lacked confidence now. "These are documents," Veda cut him off. "And now, with your permission, my client will speak." All eyes turned to me. I stood slowly, not looking at Trevant but at the faces around the room. "Good afternoon," I said, my voice steady, unwavering. The voice of an archivist is used to speaking truth. My son spoke of the Dubois family's honorable legacy. I have dedicated my life to serving this family and preserving its history. Allow me to clarify. I pulled another set of papers from my bag. Legacy is not just houses and money. It is chiefly memory and truth. I placed a letter from my father-in-law on the table. This is a letter from Langston Dubois to his adopted son, my husband, Cornelius. He wrote about love, duty, and nobility. He wrote of saving an orphaned boy by giving him his name. This, I said calmly, is the true legacy of the Dubois family, love and selfless sacrifice. I presented my family's history before them like solitaire, revealing the truth but not the whole truth. I did not name Orion Thorne. I did not mention the betrayal. The family's honor, even as it stood, was not to be publicly tarnished. Simply put, Cornelius is adopted, the son of a persecuted scientist whom Langston Dubois saved from crisis and gave his name and love. Langston left this house to me because he trusted I would preserve his spirit, the spirit of a family built not on blood but on love. And my son, for the first time, I looked at Trevant, had decided that his claim to the house was based on a forged paper. I fell silent. And in that silence, everything became clear. I did not accuse. I merely placed two documents side by side. One, a letter breathes love and nobility, the true history of a family. The other, a counterfeit act steeped in greed and deception. I contrasted true legacy against mere entitlement. That was the end. I saw it on their faces. Uncle Peter slowly stood and approached the table. He took the letter from my father-in-law and read it. Then he looked at Trevant with such disdain that he seemed to shrink away. Trevant's business partners quietly rose without a word of farewell, heading toward the exit. They did not want to be involved with a man who was not only a fraud but not truly a Dubois. Kessia stood clutching her husband's hand. Her face was pale with fear. She watched the guests leave, witnessing the ruins of their world. And I thought, at that moment, she hated him. Trevant stood alone in the room. Broken. Destroyed. Not by courts. Not by police. But by the truth I, as an archivist, had carefully brought to light. His final game turned into a public execution, one he arranged himself. He was exposed as a cruel, greedy impostor before all those whose opinion mattered more to him than life itself. He was utterly and finally broken. I turned and looked at no one. Then I walked out of the room. Veda followed me silently. We walked down the street where the cool spring air awaited us. It had never seemed so fresh and clean before. We didn't say a word. Everything that needed to be said had already been said. 6 months passed. Autumn arrived, painting the garden in shades of gold and deep red. The house grew very quiet. This silence no longer weighed me down. It was healing, like a cool compress pressed gently on a wound. Light streamed through the freshly cleaned windows, carrying the scent of magnolia and the soft ticking of the old clock in the living room. Cornelius passed away at the end of summer, quietly in his sleep, in bed. His exhausted heart simply stopped beating. I held his hand until the very last moment. We didn't speak of Trevant. We didn't speak of the past. We spoke of our youth, of our first date at Forsyth Park, of how funny he looked trying to fix a leaking faucet. We said goodbye. And when he left, I mourned him, not the husband who bore another's name, but my Cornelius, the only man I ever loved. I buried him beside his adoptive father, Langston Dubois. Two noble men, whose stories, as it turned out, were deeply intertwined, now resting side by side. Trevant was absent from the funeral. He and Kessia vanished. They moved out of the city apartment and sold it to pay off debts I never suspected. Their world, built on the prestige of the Dubois name, collapsed in a single day. Partners turned away. Friends stopped answering calls. The society they longed to shine in had cast them out. I heard from distant relatives that they moved to a small town in Alabama, where Kessia found work as a receptionist in a beauty salon. There was no word of Trevant. No calls, no letters. To me, he simply ceased to exist, like the ghost I once spoke of. I felt no triumph, no hatred. Only an emptiness where motherly love had once lived. Today, I went down to the basement. But it was no longer the dark, damp tomb where my rebirth began. I had hired workers. They cleaned, whitewashed the walls, installed new lighting. Along the walls, there were no dusty shelves but new pine wood shelves, fragrant with resin. In the center stood a large, sturdy desk, my desk. This basement, once my prison, had become my sanctuary, my personal archive, the place where I finally returned to myself. Slowly, I arranged photographs, letters, and old documents on the desk. Throughout my life, I had been the keeper of other people's stories, the history of the Dubois family, of my husband, of my son. I carefully collected, cataloged, and protected them. Now it was time to gather my own story. I took a new album with blank pages bound in leather. On the first page, I neatly placed Langston Dubois's letter, a document of love and nobility that had become the foundation of this story. Next to it, I placed a photo, not a wedding picture, not one with my son, but a small black and white photo taken many years ago. In it, a young woman with short hair and glasses sat at a desk piled with old books, looking into the camera with delight. That was me, Idella, a 20-year-old history student at Spelman College, passionate, hopeful, full of plans, the self I had buried beneath the ruins of family duty and sacrifice. I looked at that girl and smiled. I had come back to her after over 40 years of serving others, after betrayal and pain, after the coldness of the basement. At last, I had found her. I was no longer just a keeper. I had become the author of my own story, in which I decided what mattered and what should be left in the past. I did not erase anything, neither the joy of motherhood nor the bitterness of disappointment. But now, I marked the narrative myself. I gave meaning to the events as I saw fit. I finished my work and moved toward the small basement window that the workers had cut through at my request. It looked straight out onto the garden. From down here, the world looked different. I saw not the tree trunks, but the roots dug deep into the earth. I saw the fallen leaves that would become soil for new life in the spring. I placed my hot cup of tea on the windowsill. The scent of Earl Grey mingled with the smell of earth and withered leaves. Steam rose from the cup, and the world beyond the glass grew slightly blurred, like a faded watercolor. I took a sip. The house was still. And so was my soul. For the first time in many years, I did not feel like a wife, a mother, or a daughter-in-law. I was simply Idella, a woman looking out over her garden through her window. A woman no longer defined by past sacrifices but by the peaceful, conscious future she had built for herself. I am free, completely, utterly free, until my very last breath. Free. And that is where my story ends. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this story resonates with your soul, please like and subscribe to the channel. Your feedback is the greatest support I could ever ask for. I wish you peace in your heart and warmth in your soul. Until we meet again. What a complex yet deeply moving story this has been, dear listeners. A story of sacrifice, betrayal, and the terrible price sometimes paid for freedom and dignity. It surely gives you much to think about, doesn't it? The main question that remains is this: where is the line, the boundary where a mother's forgiveness ends and the fight for one's own life begins? Did Idella do the right thing by destroying her own son's world, even in response to his cruelty? Was it an act of revenge or a calculated, cold justice? I'm sure each of you has your own perspective. Some might condemn Idella for her ruthlessness, while others may admire her strength and determination. Perhaps you still wonder about the fate of the characters, or a detail in the story that sparked your curiosity. Please share your thoughts in the comments below this video. I always love reading your reflections and seeing how the same story echoes differently in each of our hearts. Your opinion matters deeply to us. If this story touched you, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Every like, every new subscriber, means the world to us. It fuels our passion to find and bring you more stories just as captivating. It's important to know that our work is meaningful and appreciated. Did you enjoy this story? Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you love stories like this, you can support me by sending your heartfelt thanks, so I can continue to bring you many more like it. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I look forward to hearing your thoughts about this story. On your screen, you'll see 2 new life stories I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel, don't forget to subscribe. See you next time, with love and gratitude.